Donald Trump boasted he ended 10 wars in just 7 months. Yet 140 civilians were slaughtered in Congo days after his so-called peace deal, and 7 million lives still hang in the balance across the conflicts he claims to have solved. In a live, nationally televised showdown, Jasmine Crockett unleashed fury, branding him a terrible negotiator as Congress erupted in screams, boos, and chaos. Cameras zoomed in on Trump, frozen, trembling, while millions of Americans watched history unfold. This isn't just a political fight, it's a war over truth itself. So here's the question: when the smoke clears, will America remember Trump as a peacemaker? Or a fraud exposed? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber was already on fire before a single word was spoken. Reporters crowded the aisles, cameras flashing like lightning, the entire nation glued to their screens. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. It was a battlefield, and tonight the world would see blood. At the witness table sat Donald Trump, smug and untouchable, that ridiculous red cap stretched across his head like a crown of arrogance. Trump was right about everything. His grin was a challenge, a taunt, as if daring the universe to prove him wrong. Then the doors opened, Jasmine Crockett entered, and the air itself seemed to tighten. She walked with the kind of composure only found in those who've carried the weight of injustice on their shoulders for far too long. Every step echoed like a war drum. Her eyes were not simply focused on Trump, they cut straight through him, stripping the layers of bluster and lies. For the forgotten voices in America, the mothers of soldiers, the communities left behind, the families scarred by war, she was their warrior stepping into the arena. Trump smirked wider, but for the first time, his smirk looked rehearsed, fragile, almost nervous. Before the gavel even struck, Trump leaned into the microphone. His voice boomed, heavy with that familiar mix of bravado and venom. "I solved 10 wars in 7 months. The words hung in the air like poison gas. A ripple of gasps shot across the chamber. Some Republicans jumped to their feet, clapping with choreographed obedience, while Democrats froze in stunned disbelief. The reporters typed furiously, headlines exploding onto screens across the nation. Trump claims Nobel-worthy peace, but behind the applause came the murmurs, the knowing whispers. Because everyone in that chamber knew the truth, Congo still bled. Armenia and Azerbaijan still glared across a closed border. Israel and Iran had merely paused the bombs, not buried them. 10 wars solved. It was fiction dressed up as glory, and yet Trump basked in it, soaking in the gasps as though they were applause, pounding the table with his fist like a showman on stage. The camera zoomed close. Sweat glistened on his temple, but his grin never faltered. He loved this, the chaos, the spectacle, the chance to sell himself as the savior of nations. But in the corner of the frame, the nation saw Jasmine, silent, her fingers tapping once on the folder in front of her. Inside were documents, casualty counts, cold statistics of lives lost under Trump's so-called peace. She hadn't spoken yet, but her silence screamed louder than his thunder. For a fleeting second, Trump's eyes flicked toward her, and something unspoken passed between them. The predator recognizing the hunter. He adjusted his cap, leaned back as though untouchable, but his knuckles whitened as they gripped the edge of the table. The chamber was no longer just a room. It was a coliseum. Millions of Americans sat in their living rooms, bars, and union halls, leaning forward, waiting for the inevitable collision. The air vibrated with suspense, the kind that makes your chest tighten. Jasmine leaned into her microphone, steady and deliberate. The storm had arrived, and across America, one question burned hotter than all the rest. When Crockett strikes back, will Trump survive the blow? The chamber still echoed with Trump's bragging when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice slicing through the nose like a blade. "You didn't solve wars," she declared, steel in every syllable. "You staged theater while people bled." The words didn't just land, they detonated. Reporters froze mid-keystroke, cameras zoomed in, and even the clapping Republicans faltered. Across America, televisions flickered with Crockett's glare as millions leaned closer, their hearts pounding to the rhythm of her words. Trump blinked, caught off guard for a fraction of a second, then forced a grin as though her attack were beneath him. But Jasmine didn't give him the chance to breathe. She slammed her folder open, pulling out the first sheet like evidence in a trial. "Congo, Rwanda. After your so-called peace deal, 140 civilians were massacred. In a single week, Mothers buried their children. Villages were burned. And you. Her finger stabbed the air in Trump's direction. You called it progress. A stunned silence fell, heavy and suffocating, broken only by gasps from the gallery. That silence shattered when Jim Jordan leapt from his chair. His voice, sharp and furious, ricocheted off the walls. Lies, pure lies. President Trump brought stability. You're twisting the facts, and you know it. He jabbed his finger at Jasmine like a weapon, his face red with rage, spittle flying, as he shouted, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned her head slowly, eyes locking onto him, and spoke with the precision of a sniper. Selling fake peace for cheap applause doesn't make you a patriot, Mr. Jordan. It makes you complicit. The chamber roared, half with outrage, half with thunderous approval. Trump leaned forward now, fists clenched on the table, his smirk gone, his jaw tightening as if trying to contain the storm. You're grandstanding, he snapped, voice low but venomous. Those people died because of their own leaders, not because of me. Jasmine's laugh cut through his excuse like broken glass. Their blood is on the soil, Mr. Trump, and yet here you sit, boasting about Nobel Prizes while graves are still fresh. Tell me, how many coffins must be filled before you call it victory? The words reverberated through the chamber, hitting harder than any headline. Jim Jordan tried again, shouting over her, but this time his voice drowned under the swell of murmurs and gasps. The audience wasn't listening to him anymore. They were locked on Jasmine, transfixed by her fury, her relentless rhythm of truth. Even the cameras seemed to tilt toward her, capturing the glint in her eyes, the defiance in her posture. Trump shifted in his chair, tugging at his tie, his silence louder than any rebuttal. For a long moment, the chamber seemed to hold its breath. Jasmine stood steady, her presence towering even as she sat, unblinking, unyielding. The tension was no longer confined to Capitol Hill. It seeped into living rooms across the nation, into the hearts of those who had lost faith in politics. It suddenly felt a spark of justice flicker alive, and then, as the gavel hammered for order, the question rang louder than the chaos. Can Donald Trump withstand Jasmine Crockett's unrelenting truth, or will this be the moment his empire of lies begins to crumble? The chamber was already crackling with tension when a shrill voice cut through the storm. Marjorie Taylor Greene shot up from her seat, waving her hands like a zealot at a revival, her voice screeching over the chaos. Trump is a savior. He's the only one who brought peace when the world was falling apart. Her words rang with desperation, bouncing off the oak-paneled walls, desperate to reclaim control of a narrative slipping fast from their grasp. Reporters snapped their heads toward her, tense posed, waiting to see how Crockett would respond. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She turned slowly toward Greene, eyes locked like a hawk fixing on prey. Her voice, calm but edged with fire, cut through the din with surgical precision. If saviors leave coffins behind, she said, pausing to let the silence choke the air, America doesn't need them. The words detonated like dynamite. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Half the chamber froze in shock while the other half roared with approval. MTG staggered back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, but nothing came out. She had been gutted in a single line. The chamber collapsed into chaos. Democrats pounded the tables, shouting shame, while Republicans yelled over them, their voices blending into a cacophony that drowned the gavel's pounding cry for order. Protesters in the gallery rose to their feet, chanting truth, truth, truth. Security guards rushed forward, unsure whether to control the lawmakers or the audience. Reporters hammered their keyboards, tweets and breaking alerts flooding the airwaves. Crockett destroys Greene, Congress erupts, and there, in the center of the storm, was Donald Trump. He sat motionless, his grin gone, replaced by something far more fragile. His jaw worked as if searching for a comeback, but no words came. The cameras caught it, the twitch in his cheek, the tremor in his fingers, the sudden stillness of a man who thrived on no's, but now drowned in silence. For the first time all night, the performance faltered. Jasmine seized the moment, her voice rising above the thunder. America has bled enough for the lies of men who call themselves saviors. Peace is not a costume you put on for applause. It is sacrifice, it is honesty, it is leadership. And if Mr. Trump cannot tell the difference, then history will. Her words cut deeper than the chance, silencing even some of the chaos. The truth in her tone was undeniable, like a hammer breaking glass. Trump's face remained frozen, the weight of her indictment hanging on him like a shroud. The cameras zoomed closer, transmitting every flicker of discomfort to millions of homes across the nation. For years, he had controlled the spectacle. Tonight, the spectacle was consuming him. And across America, from crowded living rooms to quiet diners, from college dorms to veterans' halls, the same thought echoed with electrifying clarity. Is this the moment the mask shatters, when the country finally sees through Donald Trump's empire of lies? The chamber still shook from the explosion of chants and shouting when Jasmine Crockett rose to her feet, a stack of documents clenched in her hand like a weapon. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The calm steel in her tone cut sharper than any scream. "Let's break down these 10 so-called wars," she said, eyes locked on Trump. "Let's strip away the illusion." Her words carried like thunder rolling across a battlefield. Silencing even the loudest hecklers, she lifted the first sheet. Armenia and Azerbaijan. Mr. Trump claims peace. That the border remains sealed. Soldiers still stare each other down. Across no man's land. What he parades as a victory is nothing but an agreement to reopen trade routes, an agreement that has yet to take effect. That is not peace. That is a stalled negotiation wearing a mask. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Cameras zoomed on Trump's face. His jaw twitched, but he said nothing. Jasmine dropped the page on the table with a sharp slap, then pulled another. Israel and Iran. He brags about a ceasefire, a triumph of diplomacy. In reality, it was 12 days of bloodshed, ending in nothing but a fragile pause. Missiles silenced for now, but the nuclear threat remains, the danger unresolved. Calling that peace is like calling a storm finished because the lightning stopped, while the thunder still rattles the earth. Murmurs swept through the audience, heads nodding, some whispering, others shaking in disbelief at the clarity of her attack. She reached for the third. And then there is Egypt and Ethiopia. Not a war at all, a dispute over a dam. A negotiation, yes, but never an armed conflict. Yet somehow Mr. Trump tallied this in his count, inflating his record like a businessman cooking his books. He even claimed America paid for the dam, a lie Ethiopia itself denied. This is not just deception. This is fraud packaged as foreign policy. The chamber erupted in noise again. Boos, claps, shouts from both sides. Jasmine raised her hand, commanding silence. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is what I call the Nobel Peace hoax, a theater of smoke and mirrors staged for headlines, for ego, for applause. But let's be clear, there are no Nobel Prizes in graveyards. There is no peace in the sound of mothers weeping over fresh coffins." Her words slammed into the room with the weight of a verdict, forcing even Trump's allies to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Trump leaned forward, opening his mouth, but Jasmine cut him off before he could form a word. "You can count 10 wars, Mr. Trump. You can count them on a stage, in a speech, in a fantasy where you crown yourself savior. But the truth is this: you didn't end wars. You paused them, twisted them, invented them. And while you sold America a fairy tale, people die." The silence that followed was deafening, a silence more damning than any outburst. The camera panned across the chamber, to Trump's frozen face, to Green's seething rage, to Jordan's restless shifting, and finally back to Jasmine standing, tall, unshaken, her shadow stretching across the room like a verdict. And the question that now burned across millions of screens, whispered from living rooms to bars, was not whether Trump had solved wars, but something far more dangerous. If these were lies, then what was the truth waiting to be uncovered? The moment Jasmine's words branded Trump's record as the Nobel Peace hoax, the nation convulsed. Screens everywhere lit up with the clash. CNN ran the headline in blazing red: "Crockett exposes Trump's peace lies." Fox News countered with its own spin, blaring, "Trump attacked in fiery hearing." MSNBC's banner screamed, "Chaos in Congress, Crockett versus Trump." 3 networks, 3 narratives, but all locked on the same split screen: Jasmine's piercing stare on one side, Trump's frozen smirk on the other. America wasn't just watching. America was holding its breath. Across the country, living rooms became war rooms. In a small-town diner in Pennsylvania, a veteran sat stiffly, his coffee untouched, head shaking in disbelief. He had fought overseas, watched comrades fall under banners of false promises, and now he muttered to no one in particular, "That's not peace. That's betrayal." In Chicago, a mother sat alone in her living room, clutching a folded flag. to her chest, her son's name etched in stone at Arlington. She wiped tears from her face as Jasmine's voice thundered through the TV. "There are no Nobel Prizes in graveyards." The mother whispered through sobs, "Finally, someone said it." On college campuses, the younger generation turned outrage into wildfire. Twitter and TikTok erupted in real time. Hashtags surged to the top of trending. Hashtag peace hoax, hashtag Crockett exposes, hashtag truth over lies. Clips of Jasmine slicing through Trump's claims spread like shockwaves, each one replayed with captions like "she destroyed him" and "this is history." In dorm lounges, students huddled around screens, their chants of truth, truth, echoing the protesters in the congressional gallery. The fight inside the chamber had spilled out into the bloodstream of a restless America. Meanwhile, the pundits circled like vultures. On CNN, analysts dissected Crockett's precision, calling her a voice of accountability in a sea of lies. On Fox, loyalists fumed, portraying her as grandstanding for the cameras, even as split-screen footage betrayed the reality. Trump frozen, eyes darting, his hands twitching nervously against the wood of the table. On MSNBC, a panelist's voice cracked with emotion. "This isn't just about lies, this is about the lives those lies cost." Their words, raw and unpolished, sank deep into the viewers' hearts. But the spectacle was more than sound bites. It was the look in people's eyes, the betrayal of soldiers who fought in wars Trump claimed to end, the grief of families who buried loved ones while he demanded applause, the rage of young Americans who saw their futures gambled away in the theater of ego. Every angle of the broadcast magnified the contrast. One leader standing for truth, the other drowning in the weight of his own fabrication. The night burned with outrage, but outrage is fleeting unless it transforms. Jasmine Crockett had ignited something, but could it hold? Could her words be the spark that forced accountability in a country to use to spectacle without consequence? That was the question coursing through televisions, radios, and smartphones. As millions watched, tweeted, and wept, and as the split screen lingered, Jasmine unshaken, Trump visibly rattled, the question echoed louder than the gavel's hammer. Can Jasmine Crockett turn this national fury into the reckoning America has long been denied? The chamber was already a battlefield when Trump finally snapped. He slammed his palm against the table, leaning into the microphone with his face flushed crimson, spittle spraying as his voice thundered across the room. "You're political trash," he bellowed, his words vibrating through the chamber like a cannon blast. "Without me, the world would be in flames. I stopped chaos. I stopped bloodshed. I kept America safe while you and your so-called allies sat back and did nothing." His voice cracked with rage, veins bulging at his temples, his body shaking as though the weight of his own fury might consume him. The Republican side of the chamber erupted in cheers, pounding the desks, desperate to breathe life back into a crumbling narrative. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. When she leaned forward, her voice was calm, deliberate, and far more devastating than Trump's roar. "The world is in flames because of you," she said, every word like a blade piercing the haze of noise. The room gasped, a sharp intake of air that cut through the chants and cheers, leaving a hollow silence in its wake. The cameras caught it perfectly, Trump's triumphant sneer faltering, his pupils darting as if searching for cover. That silence lasted only a second before Marjorie Taylor Greene erupted again, screeching across the chamber like nails on glass. "You're lying. President Trump saved lives. He saved the world, and you're a disgrace for even standing there." But Jasmine lifted her hand, and when she spoke, it wasn't with insults, but with facts sharp enough to draw blood. 140 dead in Congo after your so-called deal. 30 villages displaced in Asia during your pause. 7 million lives hanging in limbo while you stage photo ops. Those aren't lies, they're numbers, and numbers don't bow to your ego. The words landed like hammer strikes, each statistic louder than Greene's shrieks, drowning her until she sat back down, red-faced and trembling. The chamber's energy shifted violently. Democrats leaned forward, nodding, some pounding the table in approval, while Republicans hissed and muttered under their breath. Journalists in the gallery typed so quickly their keys clattered like gunfire. The American people were watching this in real time, veterans clenching their fists in rage, mothers with tears staining their cheeks, students screaming hashtag Crockett exposes into the digital void. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was raw accountability. Live on national television, Trump rose halfway out of his chair, fingers stabbing the air toward Jasmine, his voice cracking with desperation. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand power. You don't understand negotiations. Without me, Russia would have taken Ukraine in a week. Without me, Iran would have leveled Israel. Without me, China would already own the Pacific. He was shouting so wildly the microphone screeched with feedback, his words spilling into incoherence. Jasmine leaned back slightly, never losing control, her voice measured and merciless. No, Mr. Trump, without you, the world might finally heal. You don't negotiate peace, you negotiate surrender. And the only thing you ever saved was yourself. Her words cut deep, not just through the chamber but into the living rooms of America. Resonating like a verdict, Trump's face froze, his mouth half open, the fury trapped in his throat. For a moment, the entire chamber sat on the knife's edge, every pair of eyes locked on him, waiting to see if he would implode or explode. And across the nation, a single question seared itself into the collective conscience. How far will Donald Trump go to silence Jasmine Crockett before the truth buries him completely? The chamber still buzzed with the aftershock of Trump's outburst when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice low but razor-sharp, cutting through the nose with surgical precision. For you, peace isn't compromise, she began, her eyes locked on him like a predator circling prey. Peace is surrender. And that's why you're a terrible negotiator. The words detonated in the silence, echoing across the oak-paneled chamber with the force of a gavel. The audience gasped, a collective shudder sweeping the room as if the nation itself had been slapped awake. Some lawmakers clapped instinctively, the sound cracking like gunfire, while others stared in stunned disbelief. Trump stiffened, his face twitching, his smirk struggling to hold against the weight of her indictment. He had built his empire on the myth of being the ultimate deal-maker, the man who could bend adversaries to his will. Jasmine had just torched that myth on live television. You don't negotiate to build bridges, she continued, her voice rising now, steady and unflinching. You negotiate to break people down, to make them kneel, to force the weak into submission so you can crown yourself the victor. That's not leadership, that's bullying with a microphone. The line landed like a body blow, and the chamber erupted again, a mixture of cheers, boos, and the frantic clicking of reporters' keyboards capturing every word. She pressed on, flipping through her documents like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. You called the Israel-Iran pause a triumph, but a pause isn't peace. You claimed Armenia and Azerbaijan were settled, that their border is still locked, their soldiers still stare each other down, waiting for the next spark, and you dared to call Egypt and Ethiopia a war just so you could pad your count. Her eyes scanned the room, then fixed back on Trump, unrelenting. You inflate numbers like you inflate your businesses fraudulently, recklessly, without shame. And you expect this country to thank you for it. The sound in the chamber turned feral, gasps mixing with shouts. Republicans banged their desks, furious, while Democrats rose halfway out of their chairs in approval. Even the press gallery leaned forward, pens suspended midair, hanging on her every word. Trump gripped the table, his knuckles whitening, his body taut with barely restrained rage, but Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping into a tone so cold it chilled the room. You don't create win-win outcomes, you don't even believe in them. For you, if one side doesn't lose, then it's not a victory. And that philosophy has cost lives, it has cost America credibility. It has cost us our standing in the world. The silence that followed was thunderous. Trump's lips parted, but no sound came. His entire persona, the great negotiator, the self-proclaimed savior, was crumbling in real time, broadcast to millions of homes across America. Jasmine's stare was unblinking, unyielding, her words heavy with the weight of truth, and as the camera zoomed in on his frozen face, the question wasn't just whispered in the chamber but screamed across a divided nation. Can Jasmine Crockett finally prove, once and for all, that Donald Trump isn't fit to lead? The room held its breath, but Jasmine Crockett was not done dismantling the myth. She reached for another sheet, her voice steady, her tone sharpened with righteous fury. Mr. Trump, you brand yourself as the deal-maker who kept the world from burning, but let's remind America of the deals you actually touched. Her words triggered a shift in the chamber, like the lights dimming before the next act of a trial. First, she said, lifting a page high so the cameras caught the bold headline, Iran nuclear deal, You walked away from a binding agreement that kept Iran's nuclear ambitions in check. You ripped it apart without a replacement, without a plan, and what followed? Escalation, airstrikes, retaliations, a nuclear program revived and stronger than before. Gas spread like wildfire through the audience. She dropped the page onto the table with a loud smack, each sound punctuating her indictment. You didn't prevent conflict. You poured gasoline on dry timber and called it strength. The next sheet came faster. North Korea. You paraded yourself across the DMZ, grinning for cameras, shaking hands with a dictator. But what happened after the show? No deal, no dismantling, no disarmament. North Korea continued building weapons while you celebrated photo ops. You left the world with fireworks for television, not security for the people. Murmurs grew louder, the chamber's energy shifting again, some Republican allies squirming in their seats, unwilling to meet the camera's gaze. She moved to the final page, her eyes flashing. And NATO, the alliance that held back Russia for 70 years, the partnership forged in blood and sacrifice. You nearly broke it with your tantrums, treating allies like enemies and enemies like friends. You weakened trust, emboldened aggressors, and gave Putin exactly what he wanted. Doubt in America's reliability. The words struck harder than any insult. Reporters hammered their keyboards. The press gallery buzzed like a hive. Even those who despised her couldn't ignore the precision of the blade she wielded. Jasmine let the silence linger, then leaned in, her voice dropping into a deadly calm. You didn't prevent wars, you planted seeds for the next ones. Her words rolled through the chamber like a thunderclap, each syllable heavy with consequence. She wasn't just addressing Trump anymore, she was speaking to America, to the world, to history itself. The veterans in the audience shifted uneasily. The mothers of soldiers clenched their fists, some whispering prayers, others seething with anger. Even the younger generation watching from phones and laptops felt the sting, their feeds exploding with captions, "Seeds of War, Trump exposed." Trump sat rigid, his chest heaving, lips pursed tight to hold back the fury boiling inside. His eyes darted across the chamber, searching for an ally, a lifeline, but finding none strong enough to shield him from the truth Jasmine had unleashed. The cameras stayed locked on him, capturing every twitch, every ounce of discomfort, his silence betraying more than his words ever could. The chamber, the networks, the nation, it all felt like a courtroom where the verdict was inevitable. But Jasmine didn't close with victory, she closed with a warning. Her voice rang out, sharp, prophetic, unforgettable. So I ask America this: when those seeds bloom, will we harvest peace or reap the chaos Donald Trump has sown? The chamber had turned into a furnace, and Trump, cornered and stripped of his myth, finally erupted. He slammed both fists against the table so hard the microphone screeched with feedback. His face burned crimson, sweat rolling down his temples, as he hurled venom across the room. "You're a disgrace," he bellowed at Jasmine, his voice cracking with rage. "A disgrace to this country, a disgrace to this Congress, a disgrace to the very flag you claim to serve." The words weren't argument anymore, they were obscenities dressed as patriotism, raw fury spilling out like gasoline on fire. His Republican allies roared with him, pounding their fists against desks, but their no's only amplified the desperation of a man unraveling before millions. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She leaned into her microphone, her eyes blazing, her voice slicing through the chaos with the force of a whip. "Dead or a disgrace in your eyes," she shot back, her tone sharp as shattered glass. "Then a liar in history's eyes." The chamber froze. The line landed like a dagger, clean and lethal. Gasps echoed from the gallery. Journalists scrambled to capture the quote, and even Trump's allies faltered for a split second, their chants caught in their throats. The camera zoomed in on Trump's face, his lips quivered, his eyes narrow, but his silence screamed louder than his rage. Then came the breaking point. Marjorie Taylor Greene shot up from her seat, her face twisted with fury. "This is a witch hunt. You people are evil, and I won't sit here and watch you destroy the greatest president in history," she screeched, her voice so shrill it rattled the rafters. She grabbed her papers, scattering them across the desk, and stormed toward the door. When she slammed it shut, the echo rolled through the chamber like a gunshot. The spectacle was complete, Trump's fiercest defender fleeing the battlefield, leaving him alone at the center of the storm, The room descended into bedlam. Democrats roared with applause, some rising to their feet, others chanting Jasmine's name. Republicans shouted back, their fury no longer unified but fractured, some looking down, others visibly shaken by the unraveling scene. The press gallery pulsed with energy, reporters shouting into phones, their words already blasting into breaking news tickers across the nation. And still, Jasmine sat posed, calm in the eye of the storm, her gaze fixed on Trump as if daring him to try again. Trump's shoulders heaved, his chest rising and falling like a man fighting to keep himself from collapse. His mouth opened, but no words came, only the trembling of a figure who had always thrived on control, now stripped bare on live television. The man who once commanded headlines with every word now looked cornered, powerless, undone by the truth he couldn't shout over. For the first time in years, the spectacle belonged not to Donald Trump but to the woman staring him down with unwavering conviction. And as the cameras captured his frozen face, sweat glistening under the harsh lights, the question blazed across the nation's conscience with searing intensity. Has Donald Trump finally met his match in Jasmine Crockett, the one adversary he cannot silence, cannot break, and cannot escape? The tremors of the confrontation inside the Capitol did not stop at its marble walls. They spread like a shockwave, rippling through the veins of the nation. In a roadside diner in Ohio, the clatter of forks and plates had fallen silent. Truckers, waitresses, and families leaned toward a flickering television mounted above the counter, their faces lit by the glow of the broadcast. When Jasmine's line, "Better a disgrace in your eyes than a liar in history's eyes," rolled across the speakers, the room erupted into a mix of cheers, whistles, and stunned silence. A veteran in the corner, his cap faded from decades of wear, shook his head slowly, muttering, "I've waited years to hear someone say that." The waitress wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, whispering, "Finally, someone's not afraid." Thousands of miles away, in a crowded bar in Los Angeles, young people pressed shoulder to shoulder, their phones in hand as they streamed the hearing live. When Trump's face froze on screen, the bar exploded as if a championship game had just been won. Strangers hugged, drinks were slammed on tables, and chants of Crockett, Crockett, filled the air, echoing into the night like a battle cry. Hashtags surged in real time. Hashtag peace hoax, hashtag Crockett exposes, hashtag truth over lies leaping to the top of global trends within minutes. Memes spread like wildfire, Trump's frozen face side by side with captions reading negotiator or faker. Millions of posts turned a hearing into a cultural earthquake. Outside the Capitol itself, the scene was electric. Protesters pressed against barricades, their chants pounding like drums of war. Some carried signs that read "Truth lives here" with Jasmine's face emblazoned beneath the words. Others carried stark placards listing the death tolls from Congo, Israel, and beyond, shouting, "Whose peace, whose blood?" Police tried to hold back the surging crowd, but the energy was impossible to contain. Drums, megaphones, and chants collided into a roar that seemed to fuse with the energy erupting inside the hearing chamber. It was as if America had been waiting for this exact collision, this exact moment when the mask would finally crack. Newsrooms scrambled, anchors tripping over words to describe what they were witnessing. On CNN, a commentator said breathlessly, "This feels like a turning point." On Fox, analysts struggled to defend Trump's collapse, their arguments drowned out by the split-screen images of his silence. On MSNBC, tears streaked down the face of a panelist who whispered, "I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime." Every outlet, every social feed, every whisper in a crowded room carried the same sense of something irreversible breaking open. Across the country, anticipation thickened like a storm front. People weren't just watching a hearing, they were watching history crack wide open. For some, it was vindication. For others, it was a reckoning long overdue. And as millions stared at their screens, breathless and unblinking, one question seemed to unite a fractured nation in a single heartbeat: will this be the moment that changes America forever? The chamber was still vibrating from the chants outside when Jasmine's tone shifted. The steel in her voice softened, but it did not weaken, it deepened, carrying a gravity that pierced through the nose. She looked not at Trump, but at the audience, at the cameras broadcasting to millions. "Let's talk about the people who pay the price," she said quietly, her voice trembling not from fear but from fury contained. "The people who never make the headlines, who don't sit at gilded tables, who can't buy their way onto magazine covers." Her hand pressed flat on her documents, And her eyes glisten with the weight of their stories. Communities of color, she continued, her voice rising with each syllable, have carried the burden of wars you call victories. Young Black and Latino soldiers shipped overseas, returning in caskets draped in flags, while their mothers are left to mourn in silence. Refugee families forced into our neighborhoods, struggling to rebuild lives shattered by conflicts you pretended to, and children growing up with PTSD before they can even read. That is the cost of your theater, Mr. Trump. That is the bill we pay while you collect applause. A gasp rippled through the chamber, not from shock of her words, but from the raw truth they carried. Trump shifted in his seat, his smirk gone, his face taut with irritation. But Jasmine did not even glance at him. Her focus was laser-sharp. While you strutted across the world stage bragging about deals, you ignored the war zones right here at home. Communities gutted by poverty, by gun violence, by the pandemic you mishandled. You let Black and brown families fight for scraps, while you sold America a fantasy of peace abroad. Tell me, what good is boasting about 10 phantom wars when the real war, the war on justice, the war on equality, rages in your own backyard? The chamber fell into a silence so thick it pressed against the skin. From the gallery, a soft sob broke the stillness. A woman clutched a photograph of her son in uniform, her hands trembling, her grief echoing louder than any chant. Reporters turned their cameras toward her, the image of sorrow cutting through the spectacle like a knife. Jasmine paused, letting the silence honor the weight of that moment before she spoke again. These are not numbers, they are names, they are lives. And every coffin that returns home is a testament not to your greatness, but to your failure. Outside, the chants grew louder, the crowd's rhythm sensing with her words. On social media, hashtags shifted from mockery of Trump to solidarity with Jasmine's message. Hashtag voices of the fallen. Hashtag truth for the forgotten. Across the nation, those who had long felt unseen now felt spoken for, their pain finally carved into the center of history's stage. Jasmine's final words rang out with quiet devastation. Peace is not a trophy, it is a responsibility. And, when leaders trade it for applause, it is always the powerless who bleed. Her eyes locked on the cameras, her voice unwavering. The question now is this: can we turn this pain into power, or will we let it be buried once more? The moment the gavel struck to regain order, the war of words leapt beyond the chamber walls. Television screens across America split into warring camps. On Fox News, anchors spoke with practiced conviction, calling Trump a peace hero and framing Jasmine as a radical bent on tearing down a president who dared to challenge the global order. The role of Trump shaking hands with dictators played on loop, narrated as triumphs of statesmanship. Analysts nodded gravely, insisting that without Trump, the world would already be engulfed in World War III. Their words dripped with certainty. That the footage of Trump's frozen face on the split screen betrayed the story they were trying to spin. MSNBC, meanwhile, took a sledgehammer to the same narrative. Their chyron blared. Fraud of the century. Clips of Jasmine's devastating lines were played again and again. You didn't prevent wars. You planted seeds for the next ones. Panelists described Trump's collapse as a historic unmasking, the moment his myth of invincibility shattered under the weight of truth. One analyst leaned forward, voice breaking with intensity. This isn't just about politics, this is about lives. And for the first time, those lives have a voice. In Jasmine Crockett, the audience watching at home felt the contrast as if the networks themselves were battlegrounds. CNN tried to straddle the divide, their split screen showing dueling clips, Trump raging at Jasmine cutting him down with icy precision. Their anchors debated furiously, one pointing to Trump's claims of avoiding catastrophe, another reminding viewers of the body counts left in the wake of his deals. The indecision itself felt like chaos. To the American people, the very networks they trusted to explain reality now seemed trapped in their own battle of truth versus spin. Back inside the chamber, Jasmine seized the moment. She rose again, her voice carrying above the nose of pundits, reporters, and history itself. You can let the anchors call you a savior, you can let your allies call you a hero, but history isn't written by spin doctors, she said, her voice rising to a crescendo. It's written in blood. The line detonated in the chamber. Some lawmakers audibly gasped, others pounded the desks in applause. The cameras caught it all, broadcasting her words unedited, unstoppable, cutting straight through the smokescreen of commentary that had engulfed the airwaves. Trump's head jerked upward, his lips curling into something between a snarl and a sneer, but he didn't speak. He couldn't, not with that line hanging in the air like a verdict too heavy to challenge. For a man who thrived on no's, silence had become his greatest humiliation. The nation fractured further. In diners, in union halls, in college dorms, Americans shouted at their screens, arguing not just about Trump and Crockett but about reality itself. Was he the negotiator who saved the world from fire, or the fraud who lit the matches and walked away? As the shouting swelled, one question pulsed beneath the surface of every headline, every tweet, every chant spilling into the night. Which truth will America choose to believe? The chamber's walls seemed to vibrate from the last echo of Jasmine's words when Donald Trump suddenly lurched forward, cutting her off mid-sentence. He slammed his fist on the table, the microphone squealing under the force of his interruption. "I made America safe," he roared, his voice carrying the desperation of a man fighting not just for power but for survival. His supporters erupted instantly, pounding their desks, some shouting USA, USA, in a frenzy to drown out the growing momentum behind Jasmine. The chamber fractured into chaos, but Trump leaned in harder, his face crimson, veins pulsing. In his neck, safe from terrorists, safe from nuclear war, safe from the collapse these weak politicians would have brought. "You should be thanking me." The uproar rattled the air, but Jasmine's composure didn't crack. She waited, letting the nose crest, then cut through it with a voice sharp as a blade. "Safe for who?" she demanded, her tone laced with fire. The chamber fell into a stunned hush, everyone straining to hear her next words. Her glare bore into Trump like a spotlight, unmasking a fraud. "Safe for the billionaires funding your lies. Safe for corporations that profit while our soldiers die. Safe for the dictators who cheered your tantrums while America's credibility bled away." Gasps surged like a wave. Reporters whipped their heads toward one another, the rapid staccato of keystrokes capturing her every word as if history itself demanded transcription. Trump's mouth opened in a furious retort, but Jasmine didn't yield an inch. She stepped closer, gripping the edge of the table as if she might tear it apart with her bare hands. "Tell that mother whose son came home in a coffin from Congo that she was safe. Tell the families in Ukraine and Taiwan that you made them safe by emboldening aggressors. Tell America that safety means silencing the truth, while padding your pockets with blood money." Her voice thundered across the chamber, and the gallery erupted, some with applause, some with jeers, but none unmoved. The nose spiraled. Protesters outside picked up her words through live feeds, chanting them back at the Capitol like a war cry. Inside, chants of Crockett, Crockett, collided with shouts of Trump, Trump, until the air itself felt ready to explode. Security guards shifted nervously, glancing toward one another, unsure if this was still a hearing or the opening act of something far more volatile. Trump tried to rise, his chair scraping the floor, but the camera zoomed in on his face, catching the flicker of panic behind his fury. Jasmine didn't let the moment slip. She leaned closer to the microphone, her voice low now, but heavy, deliberate, lethal. "You didn't make America safe. You made America fragile. You made the world unstable. And the only thing you protected, Mr. Trump, was your own ego." The words landed like a hammer, each syllable reverberating in the chamber and across millions of screens nationwide. The room convulsed again, some cheering, some screaming, all of it feeding into a storm that no gavel could contain. And as the cameras lingered on Trump's tightening jaw and trembling hands, America braced for the inevitable blow that was coming. The question now was no longer whether Jasmine had exposed him, but something more dangerous, more urgent. Can Donald Trump survive Jasmine Crockett's final strike, or is this the moment his empire of lies collapses before the eyes of the world? The chamber was still quaking from the verbal duel, and Jasmine Crockett moved with deliberate precision. She reached beneath her folder and drew out a thick stack of documents bound with a red seal. The camera zoomed in as she held them high, her voice cutting through the chaos like thunder. "You want to talk about safety, Mr. Trump? Let's talk about facts." The room fell eerily quiet, lawmakers craning forward, the press gallery electrified, the entire nation holding its breath. Jasmine laid the first document on the table and spread it open, a satellite map glowing under the overhead lights. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is Eastern Congo, dated just 3 days after your so-called peace deal. Red dots mark villages burned to the ground. Casualty reports list 140 dead. That's not safety. That's slaughter. dressed up as diplomacy. Gasps rippled across the chamber, and the woman in the gallery, holding her son's photograph, buried her face in her hands, weeping. The sound of her sob echoed louder than any chant. She pulled out the next sheet, intelligence leak stamped with black markings, but clear enough to see. Here is proof that your ceasefire in Armenia-Azerbaijan was never binding. Soldiers exchanged fire 48 hours after your televised handshake. You knew it, your staff briefed you on it, and still you stood before cameras and declared, "The war solved." That's not leadership, it's lying to a nation desperate for truth. Reporters scrambled, phones buzzing as headlines shot across social media. Leaked intel. Trump lied about peace. Trump shifted violently in his chair, his face pale beneath the flood of lights. "That's classified material," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You don't know what you're talking about. Those numbers are wrong." Jasmine didn't let him finish. She slammed another page down, the sound echoing like a gavel. "Wrong? Then explain this, Mr. Trump. An internal memo from your own State Department, acknowledging that the Egypt-Ethiopia conflict you bragged about wasn't even a war. You inflated your record with phantom victories. You lied to the American people and demanded a Nobel Prize for it." The room erupted into pandemonium. Democrats rose, pounding their desks, some shouting, "Resign," while Republicans scrambled to shout her down. But every attempt was drowned by the relentless tide of evidence. Jasmine unfurled photographs of mass graves, casualty counts verified by the UN, cables from foreign allies mocking Trump's self-proclaimed triumphs. Each page was a nail in the coffin of his credibility, hammered in under the blinding spotlight of live television. Trump's mouth opened, then closed again. His hands gripped the table so tightly the veins bulged along his wrists. He stammered half-formed denials, his voice breaking, his once commanding presence reduced to a man drowning under the weight of his own falsehoods. The cameras caught it all, the faltering eyes, the trembling lips, the collapse of a myth unraveling in real time. And as Jasmine stood tall, the documents spread before her like a battlefield of truth. The air in the chamber turned electric, heavy, irreversible. Across the nation, the question roared louder than the chaos, whispered in homes, bars, classrooms, and protests alike. Is this the moment Donald Trump's credibility finally shatters beyond repair? The storm of papers, revelations, and accusations had left the chamber in ruins, but the final blow came not with a shout, but with silence. Donald Trump sat rigid, his body locked, his eyes wide but unfocused, as if he were staring into a void only he could see. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, capturing every twitch of his jaw, every bead of sweat rolling down his temple. For a man who had built his empire on nose, the sudden absence of words was more devastating than any insult. He froze, lived before millions, and the myth of the indomitable deal-maker cracked in real time. The silence inside the chamber was suffocating. Lawmakers who moments earlier had been screaming and pounding desks now sat motionless, their faces caught between disbelief and awe. The audience in the gallery leaned forward, some covering their mouths, others clutching hands to their chests. Even the reporters stopped typing, their pens hanging uselessly in midair, as if the gravity of the moment had short-circuited the machinery of politics itself. Outside, the chants faded into a strange hush, as if the nation too was holding its breath. Jasmine Crockett did not raise her voice. She leaned into the microphone, her tone so soft it felt like a whisper echoing through the cavernous hall. "History will remember you," she said, her words slow and deliberate, not as a peacemaker, but as a fraud. The sentence cut deeper than any shout could have, slicing through the silence with the weight of inevitability. The chamber recoiled, a collective shiver coursing through the crowd, as if they had just witnessed a verdict written in stone. Trump blinked once, his lips parting slightly, but nothing came. No retort, no defiance, no roar to reclaim the stage. The cameras held on him, unforgiving, broadcasting to the world not a warrior, but a hollow figure, stripped of armor, exposed as fragile and human. For years, he had dominated the spotlight. Now the spotlight consumed him, and in that unbearable quiet, as the image of Trump's collapse seared itself into the memory of a nation, a single question thundered louder than the chants, louder than the silence, louder than history itself. What comes after the fall of a giant? Redemption, revenge, or the birth of something far more dangerous? The collapse inside the Capitol did not end with silence. It detonated across the nation like an aftershock. Half of America erupted in cheers, hailing Jasmine Crockett as a warrior who had spoken the truth no one else dared to utter. In city squares from New York to Los Angeles, crowds spilled into the streets waving signs that read "Fraud exposed" and "Truth has a voice." Strangers embraced as if they had lived to see a tyrant finally unmasked. Hashtags blazed across social media: hashtag Crockett Truth, hashtag Fraud Unmasked, turning into digital bonfires that lit up the night. For them, Jasmine was not just a congresswoman. She was the embodiment of accountability in an age of deception, but the other half clung to Trump with a desperation that bordered on frenzy. In rural towns, church parking lots filled with supporters hosting banners that read "Trump won peace" and "Defend our president," they blasted car horns in caravans, waving flags as though they were marching into war. Conservative talk radio spun Jasmine's words as a witch hunt, a plot to silence the one man who dared to challenge the establishment. The echo chambers flared with rage, and within hours, counter-protests surged across the same streets where Jasmine's supporters gathered, turning celebration into confrontation. The scenes grew combustible. In Washington, outside the Capitol itself, two oceans of people collided, one chanting "Crockett, Crockett," the other screaming "Trump, Trump." Police formed barricades, sirens wailed, and the night lit up with red and blue flashes. As helicopters circled above, news anchors spoke breathlessly of a nation on edge, as if America itself had been split down the middle of every street, every living room, every heart. The anxiety was palpable, like a storm cloud pressing against the sky. Families sat divided at kitchen tables, friendships cracked on social feeds, co-workers clashed in offices where TVS replayed Jasmine's devastating line on a loop. To some, this was liberation. To others, it was betrayal, but no one could deny the raw, uncontainable energy surging through the country. And as the chants and counter-chants shook the night, as millions clung either to Jasmine's fire or Trump's shadow, one truth loomed over the fractured nation like a blade suspended in the air. Which sign will define America's future, the one that demands truth, or the one that worships the lie? The air outside the Capitol was electric, the crowd swelling against barricades, chants colliding in a storm of voices. Jasmine Crockett emerged onto the steps, the weight of history in her stride, her figure illuminated by the floodlights and the glow of countless phone cameras raised to the sky. For hours America had seen her as a fighter in the chamber. Now they would see her as something greater, a beacon standing against the shadows. She raised her hand and the nose dulled, the chaos bending into silence. Her voice rang out, sharp yet steady, every syllable charged with fire. Justice is not a slogan, it is a promise. Truth is not negotiable. It is the foundation of this nation, and when leaders trade lies for power, it is the vulnerable, the forgotten, the marginalized who pay the price. The words rolled through the crowd, striking with the weight of a gavel, echoing in the hearts of mothers, workers, students, and veterans alike. Her eyes scanned the sea of faces, her tone lifting higher. I will not stop fighting for those whose voices have been silenced. I will not stop until every community of color, every family crushed by injustice, every soldier betrayed by false wars is heard. This fight is not mine alone, it is ours. And if we stand together, no lie is strong enough to break us. Cheers erupted, a thunderous wave that shook the steps of the Capitol itself. Hashtags already surged anew. Hashtag Crockett Rising, hashtag Truth Lives Here. The night pulsed with a rare unity, hope welded to fury, courage born of pain. And as her final words echoed across the streets, a single question burned into the future. Will Jasmine's fight inspire the next generation to finish what she has begun? The shockwaves from Capitol Hill thundered far beyond America's borders. In London, a British MP smirked on live television, shaking his head. Trump claimed he solved wars. The only war he lost tonight was against the truth and Jasmine Crockett handed him that defeat. In Berlin, a German newspaper splashed its front page with a stark headline, "Crockett crushes Trump. Peace hoax exposed." In Paris, commentators called her the voice America didn't know it was waiting for. While in Tokyo, analysts praised her courage as a signal that America might finally reclaim its credibility. But the reactions weren't only mockery. In Africa, leaders who had seen their nations toyed with as pawns in Trump's peace deals applauded Jasmine's relentless call for accountability. A minister from Congo, his voice raw with emotion, said, "She named our dead, she gave voice to our grief when others erased us." Meanwhile, Authoritarian regimes that once embraced Trump fumed with thinly veiled anger, their state-run media accusing Jasmine of slandering strong leadership, yet the contrast only amplified her resonance, truth cutting through propaganda. Like a flame in the dark, across global news networks, Jasmine's words replayed in a montage. History isn't written by spin doctors, it's written in blood. Anchors analyzed it as if it were scripture, dissecting every syllable, calling it one of the most devastating lines in modern politics. Social media platforms from London to Lagos trended with hashtags carrying her name, while clips of Trump's frozen face became an international meme of humiliation. What had begun as a congressional hearing had turned into a global reckoning. And as Jasmine Crockett's image filled front pages and television screens worldwide, the question reverberated from Washington to Warsaw, from Nairobi to New Delhi: has a new leader just risen on the global stage? The echoes of the Capitol clash lingered long after the chamber fell silent. Across America, the confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and Donald Trump had become more than spectacle. It had become a mirror reflecting the nation's deepest wounds. For days, the footage replayed on every screen, forcing Americans to confront a question that could no longer be ignored. What happens to a democracy when lies are given the weight of truth, and truth is treated like treason? Jasmine stepped once more before the cameras, but this time her voice carried not the fire of battle, but the weight of reflection. Democracy is fragile, she said, her tone solemn yet resolute. It bends under the weight of deception, but it does not break because the people, when armed with truth, are stronger than any light. Her words struck not with fury but with clarity, a reminder that the storm America had witnessed was not the end, but a reckoning still unfolding. She spoke of soldiers whose lives had been squandered in false wars, of mothers who carried grief while leaders chased applause, of communities left invisible in the theater of power. Yet woven into her sorrow was a spark of hope, the belief that the nation could rise stronger if it dared to face itself honestly. The cameras caught her final words, delivered with the gravity of a verdict. The lesson is simple: lies will collapse, truth will endure. But endurance is not enough. We must act, we must guard, we must choose, because democracy cannot save itself. Only we can. And as her voice faded, the question hung heavy in the air, echoing across households, classrooms, and streets alike. Will America learn from this storm or be doomed to repeat it? The night sky above the Capitol glowed with floodlights, the air still trembling from the chaos that had shaken the nation. Jasmine Crockett stood on the steps, her silhouette framed against the dome, no longer just a congresswoman but a warrior. Forged in fire, the crowd stretched for blocks, their faces lifted toward her, waiting not for sound bites, not for spectacle but for a promise. Her voice carried with unshakable strength. "I will not stop fighting," she declared, her words slicing through the night like a blade. "Not while lies poison our politics. Not while the rich and powerful profit from the suffering of the powerless. Not while communities of color are forced to carry the heaviest burdens in silence." Applause thundered, rolling through the crowd like a tidal wave. People raised their fists, their voices echoing her conviction. Jasmine pressed on, her tone swelling with passion. "Justice is not a favor, it is a right. Equality is not a dream, it is a demand. Peace is not a headline, it is a duty. And I vow to fight for them all, no matter the cost, no matter how fierce the resistance. Because this battle is bigger than one man, it is bigger than one hearing. It is the fight for America's soul." Her words ignited sparks in the crowd, tears streaming down cheeks, chants breaking through the night, young people climbing lampposts to wave banners that read "Truth lives here." She raised her hand high, as though lifting the weight of an entire nation. "I will not waver, I will not retreat, I will not be silent. This is my promise to every mother who has buried a son, to every worker silenced by greed, to every child who deserves a future not built on lies. I will keep fighting until truth stands taller than fear." The crowd erupted into a roar that shook the streets of Washington. And as her words echoed into the night, the final question pulsed like a drumbeat across the nation: who will join her in this fight? The night was alive with electricity as Jasmine Crockett descended the marble steps of the Capitol, her figure bathed in a storm of flashing cameras. The chants of thousands rippled through the air, some screaming her name in triumph, others hurling fury, but the sound merged into something larger, something historical. She did not rush, every step was deliberate, her shoulders squared, her eyes forward, a silhouette carved into the night like a warrior leaving the battlefield. Reporters swarmed, their microphones thrust forward, their questions tumbling over one another, but Jasmine didn't stop. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any speech. The images told the story. A woman who had stared down power, stripped its mask, and walked away unshaken. Above her, the Capitol dome glowed, like a sentinel, as if history itself were watching and recording every breath of this moment. And then, over the roar of the crowd, the voice of the narrator cut through like a verdict. Leaders build peace with courage, not with lies. History will decide where Donald Trump belongs. But tonight, America saw Jasmine Crockett unshaken, unbroken, unstoppable. The words hung in the air, as cinematic as the glare of the cameras, echoing in living rooms, bars, and city streets across the nation. As Jasmine reached the final step, she paused briefly, glancing back at the building where the storm had erupted. For the briefest moment, the defiance in her eyes softened into something deeper, a quiet, unyielding promise that the fight for truth was far from over. Then she turned forward, swallowed by the roar of the crowd, her name carried on chants that seemed to stretch into the night sky itself. And as the screen faded to black, the final words blazed across the silence. What do you think? Was this the turning point America needed? In the storm between truth and lies, we witnessed that real strength is not in shouting the loudest, but in standing unshaken when it matters most. Jasmine Crockett showed us that courage means speaking for the voiceless, even when the world tries to silence you. Democracy survives when ordinary people refuse to be fooled by illusions and demand justice with relentless conviction. The lesson is clear. Truth will outlast deception, but only if we choose to protect it. So I ask you, when history calls, will you have the courage to stand on the side of truth? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.